We're taking a peek into geek culture and sharing our top 10 fandom favorites. Let Your Geek Side Show presents Geek Culture Countdown. Hey guys, this is Kitty.
And this is Paul.
And we are coming to you from the Sideshow Studios in Southern California. Welcome back to the Geek Culture Countdown. It's the end of 2019, and you know what they say, hindsight is 2020. As things wrap up and we head into the new year, let's look back on the best of pop culture during the last 10 years as voted by the fans. In categories that cover movies, comics, and more, join us as we reminisce about the most exciting pop culture milestones and stories throughout the decade. Let's just get started. All right. Thank you for joining me once again, Paul.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be back.
Excellent. You're a Geek Culture Countdown veteran now.
I am. This is the first one that's not related. I'm looking for the food on this list somewhere.
Okay. Yeah,
I'm so lost.
There's no food
That'll be
on
a
this
later
one,
show,
if you guys haven't tuned in for a little bit, check out our last couple of Geek Culture Countdowns with Paul helping me count down some really cool foodstuffs. We did
just making you hungry in numerical order.
Yeah, that's true. This is one of my favorite types of podcasts. We break out every couple of months. Mm-hmm. This was a fan-chosen podcast, of course, because we could sit there. Everyone's got their idea of what even the best of 2019 would have been hard to do, but we wanted to do, everyone's doing their decade retrospectives as we prepare to say goodbye to the 2010s. Depending on who you ask, I know some people think that the decade ends technically next year, but I don't care, because any 10 years previous is a decade.
We're heading into the roaring 20s.
Roaring 20s.
Yes. I'm stoked.
So we wanted to do kind of like a big pop culture thing, especially because a lot of franchises kind of had their trilogy cappers or like series ends this year, and it was just a big deal. And it's just been a really great time for pop culture in general. So we gave you guys 10 big categories and one bonus category that I think got a lot of hate because it was so hard to choose.
It was just it was very contentious.
Very contentious, as all polls and decisions of the best are going to be. This was available on Sideshow's website for the voting, and we have pulled the results from those polls, and we're going to count them down here for you now. So our first category was almost the easiest, I think. Maybe not for voting for some people, but in terms of what was part of the category, number one was the best Marvel Cinematic Universe movie of the decade. So a couple of people did ask, why wasn't Deadpool on this list? Why wasn't Logan? Why wasn't Into the Spider-Verse? We chose the Marvel Cinematic Universe because, of course, it did have its big hurrah at the end of this decade. Yeah. And really, this decade was the more active part of the only thing that came before was the Incredible Hulk, if you count that, and Iron Man.
And Iron Man, yeah. I mean, this whole decade, I don't want to say dominated by the MCU, but as far as like superhero films, like they definitely put their stamp on this decade for sure.
Yeah.
You know, I think dominated the decade is it depends on what you like.
Yeah, depending on what you like, depending on what your sphere on Twitter or where you were following, where you were looking at what movies you ended up seeing. Yeah, Marvel did definitely put a big stamp on this year. So it shouldn't surprise anyone that the fans voted Avengers Endgame the winner of this category with 27% of the votes. And even more of a not surprise, Avengers Infinity War came in second place with 18% of the votes. So it was clear that everybody loves seeing all the characters all together.
I think it was almost like a culmination of, you know, on the technical side for Marvel, it was definitely like, oh, we put all these characters together for you. But also as a fan, it's kind of like, I sat through all of these movies. You can interpret that sentence how you want.
I don't mean to give me for that.
Yeah, I deserve this movie.
Yeah, and it was, I mean, wow, so many, not every story could be tied up neatly, and they are moving a lot of them into the television universe now, which is going to be really cool. A lot of fans, there was just some great moments of fan service, a lot of payoffs that people have been waiting for a decade. And it was a sheer testament to, just how much Marvel constructed and built a cinematic universe, kind of like unlike anyone else had done before.
I'll go on the record of saying like Marvel earned the praise that they got for Endgame because they, regardless of how you like, the movies, they really did put the time in to build these.
Oh yeah, and I mean, getting like 60 different superhero actors all together, like what the heck?
Oh Lord!
Like if you had told me, like, because I went and saw the first Iron Man when it came out, and I didn't. I mean, I keep thinking like, wow, I didn't watch another superhero film for a while, but there was a 2-year gap between the first Iron Man and the second one. It didn't come out till 2010. But if you had told me like, all right, like buckle up because this is an investment.
Oh yeah.
I don't know what I would have done because there was no way of knowing how big this was going to be.
It was Iron Man and then Incredible Hulk? I think technically.
Oh my God.
Please forgive us. It has been
a long,
10 to 11 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and that's just a testament to how much Marvel has put out and weaved through all their movies, and I can't keep it all straight. Now, the third place, not all of these categories will we go down to third place, but I pulled interesting observations. And I would have been surprised had this one not placed in the top 3, but the single most not a team up film that routinely is quoted as people's absolute favorite. Captain America: The Winter Soldier was 12% third place in the votes. Everyone else had between 7 to 2% of the votes,
like spattered across.
Yeah, once you've
100%.
got 20 something films, the votes do thin out. But Captain America: The Winter Soldier, I mean, even in just casual conversation, is just by far the most routinely chosen of the not solo films, I guess, but the solo films.
It's just a really good film. I think that, one, it definitely did a bit of a different. It kind of took the superhero genre a little bit and said, okay, we want to kind of maybe focus this more. And genre.
Iron Man came out first by 1 month. Sorry, super producer Sam. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay. Yes, I knew. I always thought Iron Man came out first, but as far as Captain America: The Winter Soldier goes, I mean, like just so many of the great Bucky and
Falcon
Cap
and Natasha.
moments. So many of the characters that we literally grew up loving, they kind of, cut their teeth on that film.
The moment that just shakes you to your core when you realize that S.H.I.E.L.D. is Hydra, and you know what? It makes sense that this is the trio that makes the top 3 in our votes because arguably Winter Soldier was the film that gave the Russos the keys to the kingdom.
That's also very true.
After that, they took on Civil War and then Infinity War and Endgame.
And then a little film called Endgame.
Yeah, then a little film called Endgame. So there was, and even though we left off X-Men films from this list or the animated features in the Spider-Verse, Marvel did kind of everywhere you looked, there was a lot of cool places to go, and I mean that was one decade under their belt. Like I can only imagine what's going to happen in the next.
I'm with Phase 4 and already
the television projects are what I'm most excited about.
She-Hulk, Moon Knight. I mean, there's so much stuff that if it were not for this decade, the era of television and movies that we're entering into, may not exist. Not even on a timey-wimey type thing because like we removed 10 years, who knows? But, oh yeah.
All right. So on the flip side of that, our next category went to another big 2 property. We wanted to know what fans thought was the best DC movie.
Oh yeah.
And again, we omitted the countless. I personally love those straight to DVD movies they do, Judas Contract and Wonder Woman Bloodlines and stuff.
And so much.
And they did that 2-part Death of Superman, Reign of Superman. That would have got my vote.
That was incredible.
But we chose for live action DC movies, and we went as far back as because this wasn't I know people call it the DC Extended Universe, but that is unofficial. So we did loop in some films that kind of were included before they kind of set up that Justice League plan. So Green Lantern was on the list. I know. I'm sorry.
I love them, but
something had to come in last place. But we also had The Dark Knight Rises on the list. But interestingly enough, number 1 spot on the list was Wonder Woman with 33% of the votes.
That's a large portion.
That is a large portion of the votes.
I'm not surprised by it though. Yeah. I think that movie it held so much resonance for a lot of people.
A lot of people for a lot of reasons, even beyond the storytelling. Like regardless of how you feel the third act of the film, which was kind of the most critically panned part of it, came out. It represented so much, and I know that every time I hear that like No Man's Land theme, like I just want to I just want to run out into a battlefield with a shield in front of me, like kind of.
Oh yeah, and I will say and this even surpasses I went back and rewatched Wonder Woman and Endgame and such. We can say spoilers, right? I mean, I would assume so. At Endgame, when everyone comes through the portals that Doctor Strange is opening up, I still love the No Man's Land scene from Wonder Woman more. where she hops up and, she's taking all the fire for everyone. It just means,
and the fact that it's called No Man's Land was like a really cool double entendre. I know that they intended that.
There hasn't been a scene in superhero film that's come close to, my admiration has not been given to a scene as much since the No Man's Land scene, since the Avengers Endgame. That's the only one that's come close. But that No Man's Land scene is so incredible, and it represents it just puts a stamp on that character. Mm-hmm. It just does. You know?
And it was a character that needed to come to film, but it was one of those ones where it's like, okay, but are they going to do it right? Mm-hmm. And I think largely they exceeded expectation on that. Such a beautiful film. I'm always a sucker for a period piece type film. Mm-hmm. So the fact that it was a little more retro. And even still, they're continuing with that retro theme because Wonder Woman's getting a sequel, Wonder Woman 84 or 1984, WW 84, however they keep referring to it. And that one, again, I think it's because a lot of these films do buy goodwill, and if the first one does well, they'll do the next one. I'm so ready for whatever weirdness with the synth 80s cover vibes and the vibrant colors and the wing armor.
Yeah. And I love so much that they Patty Jenkins and crew kind of steered into they flipped it, where in the first movie Wonder Woman was the duck out of water. And in this movie, again, spoilers, but, we see Steve Trevor back. And now she's assimilated.
And we don't even have an explanation for that.
We have nothing. And I'm fine with that. I'd want to go in blind. But Steve Trevor is now the one who's the quote-unquote duck out of water. And she has to help him assimilate into the 1984 culture.
And I'm excited to see how they're going to pull off Cheetah as her villain. Because, the fact that they had Dr. Poison and Ares in the first film, that was, really cool, and now they're going back for one of her more iconic canonical villains,
right?
Played by Kristen Wiig, no less, which is going to be fascinating. Now, it seems with these best of movies, a lot of the fans like the stuff that came most recently. Maybe it's because it's fresh in our head, or maybe because it was such a big, bold departure from what had been built before. Joker came in second place in this category with 20%, which again, between Wonder Woman and Joker, those two films got 50% of the votes. Yeah. More than 50% of the votes of DC fans, with Dark Knight Rises just a hair behind at 19%. So that was arguably the beginning of the decade. So vastly different from what Wonder Woman and Joker are.
Right. And then also, looking at these are all films that that are all peppered in between these Marvel films, and I think it provided something different to these characters that you definitely know. Everyone knows Batman, Joker, Wonder Woman, but it provided a different look, especially with Joker. That was a very different look, but it provided a nice weekend getaway, if you will, from the shared universe of Marvel, which I think was great. It was great to go in and love these films individually. Dark Knight Rises, of course, had its own microverse, if you will. Yeah. But these films are so good too.
And I think DC now is recognizing and finding the success of where Marvel's got umpteen different characters from another movie running around in someone else's film. Once DC started to, I think Wonder Woman marked the turning point because then following that we had Aquaman and Shazam, which I also think
are incredible.
They're overlooked because I think they came out really close to other Marvel films that kind of steamrolled. But the DC shines in its character work, and when they get to the point of, because remember when Universal tried to, they're like, we're going to do a dark universe. It's but each of those characters is so iconic in their own right that when you start to say, hey, let's play to a director's strengths and let's do a character piece, let's focus on these characters, that's where DC really shines through. And you did get some fun references to Batman in Shazam, but largely, personally, I Wonder Woman means a lot to me as a film, but I think Shazam edged it out in just a little bit for the overall movie experience. I had a delight watching Shazam.
Oh yeah.
And we're getting Shazam 2. They just
I always, when we'll get into it a little bit later as far as casting goes, but I'm already hooked when I see a character. It's I could not imagine another human being playing this version of a character that I've grown up loving. Yeah. And I'm just sitting there and I'm 7 again, just watching. And that's how I felt through Shazam, through Wonder Woman,
Jason Momoa as Aquaman was
I didn't feel that way through Joker. That was a lot different of a film, but it was still
I would be a little
incredible.
scared if 7-year-old Paul was like, this is it.
I love it.
So rounding out the big movies, we do have another category coming up that's mixed movie and television, but we did Best Disney Movie, and this was a tough one because I can see where the films were starting to like really there's so many Disney films that came out between the Pixar and the straight Disney and the live action remakes, etc. So the votes got really thinned out here, which was interesting to see.
Yeah.
But Coco took best with 11%, with Frozen again right behind at 10% of the votes.
Yeah, that one was a real nail biter. That one. Yeah. I mean, and both films, I believe. Coco is Pixar. Yeah, Coco is a Pixar film, and I mean it's just.
And I always lose it when I lose track of the distinctions between like this is straight Pixar, this is Disney Pixar, this is a Disney animated film, not Pixar.
I constantly lose track too, especially since I now have a Disney Pass and everything, and I love Disney. But growing up, like I didn't. My heart was not invested in Disney, and now like after so many of these movies, it's like, oh man, it's easy to remember why you love these films.
And I think the most interesting part of this is then I wanted to see, okay, because the overwhelming output is the animated features. Most of the voting in this category came like even those little like things that got 2 or 3 or 4% votes were the animated features. Live action films only accounted for 15% of the votes overall, and you had Beauty and the Beast.
Wow.
Yeah, we omitted Mary Poppins from the list, much to the chagrin of one of our coworkers. But we had the Beauty and the Beast remake, the Cinderella remake, Lady and the Tramp was on there, Dumbo, Aladdin, and they overall, and I think there was a Pirates of the Caribbean or two.
Oh, yeah, probably.
But overall, the live action films only got 15% of the love.
Interesting. Yeah, and come to think of it, I haven't seen any of the live action films.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just haven't.
Lion King as well was on there.
Yeah, I don't know. It wasn't something that struck me. Like I loved the, I think I love the animated films so much that I was just like, I don't know. I don't need to see it again.
I think Disney is synonymous with the animation, which means it's not a surprise that Coco and Frozen are like the top two.
They're both so incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're both incredible films.
So, in a subset of Disney, Lucasfilm was acquired by them. But we couldn't just do Star Wars movies because technically there haven't been that many over the last decade.
Yeah.
But we are in a bit of a Star Wars renaissance. So we opened it up to all Star Wars media, which, yes, included The Mandalorian. We actually put all 3 films of the new trilogy, but some cheeky people voted for Episode 9 already, even though at the time of this recording, Episode 9 is just about to come out, but the public hasn't seen it yet. But who knows? Maybe they're like, I'm so sure this is going to be my favorite.
You say cheeky, I say optimistic.
Yes.
They're very optimistic
Maybe they know
people.
something we don't.
Yeah, it was just J.J. Abrams. He voted,
Thanks for participating.
100 times. Thanks, J.J. Big fan of the show.
But we did open it up to the standalone films, the A Star Wars Story films, Star Wars Resistance, the animated series, Rebels.
Oh, right, yeah.
We also had The Mandalorian. And I feel like I'm forgetting something. Anyways, the winner was Rogue One, a Star Wars story with 35% of the votes.
I voted for it.
I voted for it too.
I loved it so much.
I technically cheated because I had to test the polls to make sure they worked, so I voted twice. So I voted for one thing on the test and then one thing on the real. The Mandalorian got my second vote. But
okay.
Rogue One, I think because it was so unlike anything else we'd seen from Star Wars.
Yeah, and at the time, that was the first, quote, unquote, a Star Wars story film, right? I mean, it was supposed to be this whole anthology of films. We got Solo. We got, we were supposed to get, I believe it was like an Obi-Wan film.
But that's going to be a television series now on Disney+.
Right, and we were supposed to get like a Boba Fett film. And I think, now the proto version of that, we got that with The Mandalorian. And so, I mean, they delivered on everything in just a different way than I think we thought we did. And then I think we thought we were going to get.
Yeah.
But, I mean, Rogue One was so good. I think it's because it was so self-contained.
Yeah, I think that was a beautiful thing that they were able to situate it that it was technically a prequel.
Yeah.
Like, technically, if you guys want to talk about it, it was a prequel. But it was just closely aligned enough with the original trilogy that we knew what to expect, but we didn't know how to expect it and how it would play out. It introduced, I think, some of the strongest new Star Wars characters who, unfortunately, spoilers for almost 4-year-old movie. We lost all of those characters, but they're developing a Cassian Andor and K2SO series as well.
Yeah. And
Cassian, K2, Jyn Erso, Chirrut and Baze. Not so much love for what was Saw Gerrera's alien's name? Like
right, he's the guy
Borgullet.
the guy, the heavy,
but
the
his
heavy.
alien was
I call him the me running upstairs. That guy.
Yeah, his weird alien. He's like, Borgullet will see into your mind or whatever. Not as much love for that alien, but it really did introduce, because they felt familiar. They felt like, because it was Rebels. We had Rebels. Yeah. Which coincidentally also the Rebels animated series was very high up on the list of votes. But like it was familiar enough, but also completely different.
Yeah,
and it just stood out. It was new characters. I think where Solo met some resistance was people didn't want parts of Han Solo's backstory demystified. But this was something entirely different, that we didn't know who these rebels were that were able to get the Death Star plans.
It was a whole gray area of the map that we had that we didn't know we needed unlocked, but it was unlocked, and it was so good. I mean, it was so well executed. Jyn Erso became like a fan favorite like immediately, especially with me. Like, I mean, just she was.
Well, and I love the droids. Geez. So K2SO was a nice breath of fresh air, because he combined the best parts of the fact that, like, he combined the best parts of R2, who doesn't speak, and the best parts, in my opinion, of C-3PO to get that like really dry humor, and not profanity, but like inappropriateness, kind of like, and
you've got to love
bad
like
bedside manner
the pessimistic nature of him. He doesn't mean to be. He's just he's a numbers guy.
Yeah, he's a reprogrammed Imperial droid.
Yes.
And then surprising no one. Again, I wonder if it's just due to the fact that this is the most recent thing that we've been experiencing, or genuinely if they've cracked the code. The Mandalorian had 29% of votes, coming in second place in this category.
So great. I mean,
which is, it's great. At the time of recording this, the first season has not ended, but we've already confirmed for a second season. Everybody loves a certain little someone who actually comes up in a question later on the cast, but again, it's one of those things where it's like taking a familiar concept, almost the proto Boba Fett, but showing us an entirely new side of the galaxy. I think that's where it shines.
And that's what's always been my favorite parts of Star Wars. I love, the lightsaber battles, and I love the Skywalker saga, but more than anything, I love knowing what else is happening around the world while these main characters are causing all of this havoc.
I love the background.
And this gives us the underbelly of the, the crime syndicate type, esque. I just love it so much.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So we're going to jump off the screen and to the page for now. We asked fans what their favorite comic book event was. We kept it to the big two publishers because, to my knowledge, not many other publishers do crossover events. I know Valiant actually did do some stuff like Harbinger War, which is actually pretty cool that they've got enough of a superhero universe to do that. And Image Comics, my favorite crossover was perhaps I Hate Image Comics, which was done by Scotty Young of I Hate Fairyland fame, and just lampooned every Image series that was out there. But we asked people between the big two, and actually, surprisingly, first and second place were a Marvel and we got a DC and then a Marvel. I was, and it was actually fascinating. Before we reveal the winners, DC's events took 52% of the votes and Marvel's took 48%. So it was actually a pretty even split.
Yeah.
There were a couple of things that got no votes, like there was no love for Robin Wars. Or Avengers Standoff, I think. But, when they do put out as many crossover books as they do, there's some that are bound to get left by the wayside. Number one on our list was DC's Flashpoint, which,
so good.
If you roll it back, did actually happen this decade. It got 16% of the votes.
And another one that, you were mentioning earlier about, when we were talking about the DC movies, that they had some animated, features. They did an animated feature of DC's Flashpoint, an incredible animated film put out by DC. But the comic itself, it was incredible, written by Jeff Johns.
They made Funko Pops of some of the Flashpoint versions of the characters, which they do make a lot of Funko Pops, but they don't just make any throwaway comics Funko Pops. They did a specific Flashpoint series.
and the story of Flashpoint itself has spun itself onto, the small screen being the animated stuff, and then on the silver screen with with Grant Gustin's Flash on the CW,
Yes.
they did their whole Flashpoint-esque
Yeah.
series. I mean, it has, that story has legs, I think, because it allows you to alter stuff maybe you've written.
It had really nice repercussions
Yeah.
for the DC universe, which I think a lot of people like to continue to play in. I think there's a staying power with that kind of what if what's happening can the physics of the comic books go off the rails, which actually then leads to the second place was Marvel's Secret Wars 2015, which is again one of those stories of what if we took it all and smashed it up. It was personally my favorite comic book event, apart from War of the Realms, but I'm biased on that one. But it was really fun. It wasn't as fun as a consumer and a retailer to try to figure out.
Yeah.
Because Marvel did cancel every book for the summer and then relaunch everything from a new #1 when it was concluded. But ultimately, it was a really good series. It was Asad Ribic and Jonathan Hickman. It was the last thing Hickman did for a while before his triumphant return to Dawn of X.
Yes.
We all know how that's going. He kicked down the door and was like, "I'm back." But it was a really fun event, and there's a lot of stuff that's happened. I mean, there was DC's Convergence, which was almost like Marvel Secret Wars, where it was like everything's coming together in one universe
similar,
and smashing together. But I mean, it's just fascinating that they're able to keep the gas pedal going on the crossover events.
Yeah, I mean, you always love to see it. And Secret Wars, it was a great one. I mean, arguably that's what I think, fans, comic book fans, look at that and think this is the groundwork for where we want to see the MCU go.
And surprisingly enough, we did get a couple of snapshot moments, if you will, that were from Secret Wars in Endgame. When T'Challa has the Infinity Gauntlet, there was some very specific moments. If T'Challa had snapped the gauntlet, that would have been an ultimate Secret Wars call out. But he does acquire the gauntlet in Secret Wars, which is really cool. And that one was a lot of fun because you could have multiple universe versions of each character, where Flashpoint changed the origins of certain characters or generated the Thomas and Martha Wayne,
right.
Batman and Joker. Secret Wars enabled Thors, in which pretty much everyone in the Marvel universe was a Thor because Dr. Doom or God Emperor Doom was creating his own version of the hammer for everyone. And so he had a Thor police force, which was really cool. So then you got to see some people who were actual Thors in the past, like Beta Ray Bill and Storm, alongside Groot Thor and others.
It's so great. And I love that scene. I mean, this was actually, in the interest of full disclosure, one of the first Marvel events that I read. In my life, I've generally strayed more towards DC. And around this time, in 2015, 2016, I really wanted to read, Secret Wars. It just looks so good. And that scene of seeing the two Earths kind of crashing together.
Yeah, and when Magneto is he's trying to keep them apart.
Hold them, and then you have Reed Richards, and he goes into that thing, the whatever it is. It's this egg or cocoon type thing.
Yeah, that little lifeboat thing almost.
I think it is called lifeboat. It might be. You might have just pulled that out of your head, but it might be accurate. I think that was right.
Well, you see which heroes made the jump, and so you've got Star-Lord and Jane Foster Thor and Miles Morales Spider-Man, who are the versions we know and love, ended up transposed into this weird ass amalgam world of not to be confused with Amalgam Comics, which I love dearly, but this mashup world of everything going on.
Oh, Secret Wars! I'm gonna go read that today.
Yeah,
that's what I'm doing.
That was good. It was plagued by some delays, as all best events are.
What are you gonna do?
Once it was a finished product, I think it was extremely strong. So next, we're back on the screen, but we are choosing the best video game. This was apart from the surprise round at the end. This was the most contentious category because a lot of video game fans have a lot of opinions, and believe me, I do too. I love a lot of different video games that we couldn't put on this list because we could have given it 100 options, and what would have ended up happening is every game would have gotten maybe 3 or 4% of the votes.
Exactly.
Someone would have 7%. The more we included, the more it would get stretched out. So we did consult popular discourse and other people's best of lists to see what was going on. But the clear front runner of this one was Marvel's Spider-Man for PS4 with 20% of the votes solidly. Again, that game was a masterclass in storytelling, in Spider-Man world building, and it let people live out a fantasy that like that's what video games are for is
it's an
escapism.
Yeah.
I will say that I've never had more fun in a game traveling the overworld than in Marvel's Spider-Man with the web slinging. Because most games trying to get from point A to point B, if that's not the mission, is like so tedious.
Oh yeah. I would say probably, very, kind of very similar to what you were saying is like I loved finding like those backpacks.
Oh my gosh.
Because there's something different in all of them, and then you just have like a little brief story as to why Peter Parker has this particular thing and why it's missing, and
and he's like, oh hey, I remember this is back when I did, and you can like spin it around. I like the Matt Murdock business card for when Spider-Man needed a lawyer. Oh my goodness. And then they got the Sinister Six in the game. The fact that you could go to Marvel City, like this was Marvel's New York, because you always go, okay, I know where Stark Tower is, like in the MCU,
the Sanctum Sanctorum,
Sanctorum.
Oh, it's so beautiful.
I loved going by Alias Investigations and finding the window punched out, and then going to Nelson and Murdoch and going around the corner and finding Josie's or Fogwell's gym. And it was one of those things where it's like, I am Spider-Man and I am living in Marvel's New York, which...
Yeah, you get, me and you are both big comic book fans, and like you get to live in a comic book.
Yeah.
Once you've flipped the page and bagged and boarded it, like this is the rest of the story. Like he still has to live. And like this is what Marvel's and Sony Spider-Man allowed you to do, is just live out this fantasy and this dream of the 9 to 5 of being a superhero. And it's done so well.
And all the suits.
All the suits.
They got like almost, and I love that they went and added more suits. Like after people wanted the Raimi Spider-Man suit, they added that. I love that the bombastic Bagman is in there. I love the straight up comic book suit where you look like an illustration where the rest of New York is like fully rendered. It was the ultimate love letter to Spider-Man.
Oh yeah.
But the fact that there's potential for more, because you do get left on the cliffhanger of Harry Osborn and Miles Morales is like really enticing, and so I hope they have success with that again when they come out for round 2.
And for a video game, not only a company but for a game itself to listen to its fans constantly and be on the pulse of just listening to like these are what we want in this game. That is, how could you not be successul?
Yeah. And then with that, to that end, in terms of story and open worldedness, 3 games tied for second place with 11% of the votes each. The Last of Us, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt all came in second place, which we don't have to go into all of those, but all very, very strong examples of both storytelling and then the world exploration. I do say, though, I had a harder time getting around Breath of the Wild because, like, sometimes I couldn't get a horse, and sometimes those guardians would shoot lasers at me. I would have much preferred to be Spider-Man swinging around, but it happens.
The constant amount of times, like, as soon as I saw the polls, like, boom, Skyrim. I put 180 hours into that game, and that's just something that really made me, again, escape, just like Spider-Man and, Last of Us and Breath of the Wild and Witcher. All of these games just allow you to, kind of tap into a different part of your brain that you would like to do. Yeah.
And speaking of that, my personal choice was Portal 2, which a lot of people went, Portal 2 came out this decade? I'm like, yep. But most of my other favorite Valve games did not. Super producer Sam tells everyone, go play God of War, which, that was the one that I really wanted to get to because as much as I love Norse mythology, I did not have a chance to play through this game.
Yeah, same, actually.
Super producer Sam is telling me that I need to get on that, so I think I have a new Christmas break objective.
You have homework.
I do. So now we're back on the page with the best comic series. So this wasn't an event, but this was an ongoing series that just trudged its way through, not trudged its way, just plowed its way through every month on the stands, fairly reliable. By far and away the best comic book series of the decade, Batman by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo with 34% of the votes.
That is incredible.
That is incredible.
That's the most, right? That's the most outright, I think, winner on this list so far.
I think there's one other thing on this list that has that, but because Wonder Woman had 33%. We got a couple other 33s. There's only one other thing that won by 1% over that, but that is the overwhelming, like, other choices on the list were included Saga, Jason Aaron's Thor run, House of X, Powers of 10. What else did we have? The Wicked and the Divine. Monstrous, I believe, was on there.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of indie comics. Mr. Miracle.
Mr. Miracle was a good one.
That one I was surprised actually didn't get more votes, but I think it was a more niche character.
The Tom King.
Tom King.
Yeah.
Tom King's The Vision.
Oh, The Vision.
Tom King killed it with the Maxi series. I just want to say that.
And I think a lot of his work is going to be spun out. I mean, we're looking already at, Tom King's Vision, kind of very subtle blueprints of WandaVision. And, it's... These scripts are writing themselves for a lot of these companies.
And I believe Tom King, because I don't want to get it mixed with Tom Taylor, who's also doing fantastic work, but Tom King is also currently on Batman. But by far and away, Scott Snyder, Greg Capullo, we get the Court of Owls, we get Death of the Family. Sorry, there's Death in and Death of. So many really strong storylines, and it just really
closed it out with Metal.
Yeah,
Dark Knight's Metal.
Dark Knight's Metal.
This might be one of the only series that we have that I know definitively that I have every single issue.
Oh wow!
Because
so that's me with Jason Aaron's Thor, which was tied for third place with Saga at 12% of the votes.
I mean, it's just one of and it speaks to Saga. To all of these on this list. I mean, all of these hold a favorite in someone's heart.
Yeah. And
for this, I just felt like Scott Snyder and Capullo understood the Batman that I wanted to see.
Yeah, and a lot of the imagery we do see of Batman, I keep thinking of the volume where I think it's the Court of Owls volume where he's just like, I mean, Batman's jumping down, but there's like a specific cover image that just like, when I think of Batman, that's the first image I see, and it's from that run.
Yeah, and I always think, with the Joker when he's tearing his face off.
Oh, yeah.
There's just so much, Capullo, his line work, I mean, everything, where he chooses to allow color.
Heck, these comics were then boxed with masks of like Court of Owl masks and the Joker's face mask.
I have that above my bed. I should have brought that.
That's creepy. That's cool though.
Oh, it's the creepiest. Yeah.
But it is cool to see also the latecomer this past summer's Hoxpox, if you will, House X Powers of 10, signaled a bold new return for the X-Men. Jonathan Hickman again is a continual fan favorite, and then Saga and Thor, both of which I think launched in 2012. Right. Saga's currently on hiatus still. We're wasting away. Please come back to us, Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples.
Brian.
But I do look forward to the next decade of Saga because it's only about halfway through its run. I think they're planning about over 100 issues of that.
Yeah, something along those lines.
Jason Aaron's Thor is coming to an end. It's time for a new era of Thor.
How you doing?
I'll be okay. We got some fun new Thor to look forward to at the start of the new year. But these apart from Hoxpox, these three series that we've mentioned here were decade defining, and they overtook the large portion of this decade, because I think Batman started in 2011.
2011.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and he just him and Capullo just wrapped up with Dark Knight's Metal in the summer of 2018 or end of 2018. That's a long time. And it always felt fresh. I never felt like, I'm reading the same Batman story. And I think it was just right before him and Capullo started their run on. But Scott Snyder introduced him. Scott Snyder was introduced to Batman with Jacques, on the Black Mirror, and that's like one of my favorite comic book series of all time, if not ever, if it's not my definitive number one, because it's just they allowed a very grounded Batman and just the detective aspect. Like I love to see him with the Justice League and such, but there's something about getting Batman back down to the roots, because Gotham City is a city that needs. I did like seeing him lose, and Scott Snyder wrote him losing very well.
Well, and that was for me what stood out about the Thor series was we had a Thor who lost a lot, and we had a person who then gained what he lost, and this was just a really good. These couple of runs are, I think, character defining.
100%.
Which is really cool. So, speaking of like the definitive version of your character, best superhero casting. We had a lot of films, a lot of television adaptations. We didn't include any voice actors, unfortunately, because it's harder to decide. But we went for look and physicality and tone and presence, and undoubtedly, again, 33% of the votes, Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool.
Yeah.
This wasn't a surprise.
Not a surprise at all. I mean, mask on, mask off, he's Deadpool.
Yeah.
It's hard to distinguish the two now, to be honest.
I mean, even watching Detective Pikachu, I was like, this is Deadpool as Pikachu.
This is a furry Deadpool.
Yeah, and he would love that. Two other people tied then with 17% of the votes. Chris Evans as Cap and Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. Those are also kind of not really surprises. We also didn't put every single actor on this list because we could have again, and that's where
it would be the same like the video game situation, 100 actors.
But I think with the fact that Ryan Reynolds got 33% as Deadpool, and then Tom Holland as Spider-Man got 10%, which is pretty solid because he was the third Spider-Man now we've had. Right?
He's pretty much a newcomer as far as all of these actors go, I believe, on that list. And again, all of these characters, I sit in a theater and I think could I imagine another actor playing these heroes? And no.
I love those behind the scenes things where it's like Tom Hiddleston originally auditioned for the role of Thor. Could you imagine that?
I could never. No,
it's so bizarre.
I mean, he could do it. He can do anything. He's
sure
incredible.
He could.
But it's hard to.
But yeah, my personal favorite casting of the decade was Kristen Ritter as Jessica Jones. I don't think that's any secret. No. Never could they have cast anyone else that can say the F word without ever saying it throughout 3 seasons of the show, but just with a look.
And a scoff.
Yeah. And I think those Marvel Netflix shows actually were pretty solid casting throughout, even if the scripts didn't always match up to the characters. But we'll get to that some more later. This was a fun category. This was a big decade for nostalgia. And actually, you can check out our blog. We are running an article by writer Arya Dworkin that is looking back, especially just on this year in nostalgia, because in 2019 alone, we had either the completion of or the announcement of franchise reboots for at least 7, I think.
Wow.
Famous. We got Indiana Jones, Jurassic Park, Ghostbusters, E.T., Bill and Ted, the Disney movie remakes, if you will. And oh my goodness, there was one other one. Anyways, yeah, huge year for nostalgia.
Oh, yeah.
Announcements, reboots. So we had a lot of people try to get in the driver's seat and kind of revive franchises. And speaking of driver's seat, this is the biggest winner of all, like, got the most votes out of each of its categories. The best franchise reboot was voted as Mad Max Fury Road, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah.
That was probably about 15% of those votes were me. No, I could only cheat twice. I can only vote on each thing. I got 2 votes. But Mad Max Fury Road was not only just like a really cool story continuation of the Mad Max franchise, but cinematically, it was beautiful. It was mind-blowing.
I mean, and everything from, the use of like when they introduce music in some of those films, and then when other moments when it's just dead silent and all you can hear is the uncomfortableness of like this world. I mean, and just so like, I don't know why, but like I think as an adult, I think it was kind of awesome. I had like nightmares of them spraying that silver paint on their teeth. The War Boys. Like, I just thought that was so rad.
Well, and it kept a lot of that kind of like desolate wasteland road warrior themes from was it the 80s for the original Mad Max?
Yeah, it's the Mel Gibson stuff, right?
But the theme of the environmental destruction in the desert wasteland rang even more true in this decade. And Max himself, the Mad Max, Tom Hardy barely spoke in the film.
Yeah.
But he was still such a presence. And I just can't get over Charlize Theron driving a war rig. Like the wives and Furiosa. Like that was just such a beautiful introduction to that series.
And I loved the they just went for it with like the like the car battles and such. Like they didn't really steer away from anything. And, no pun intended.
And so many of the cinematic shots, a lot of those were practical effects. There were really people rigged up on the things. The Doof Warrior, I think that's his name, with the flaming guitar.
Oh, yes.
And the guys on the catpoles.
My dream job.
Yes. Well, that was just such a beautifully imagined film. Like it almost didn't feel like a reboot. I mean, like I guess that is what a reboot is, though. Like it balanced this is from that world, but it's so vastly different. It was interesting because we had a couple of television reboots. Westworld got about 10% of the votes, but the second place reboot that actually surprised me was people really loved the Rise of the Planet of the Apes.
That got my vote.
That got 15% of the votes.
Yeah, that was my vote. I mean, I loved it. I loved it so much. I loved the character growth from the first one with James Franco, and then the second one. I don't have these names on the top of my head because
it's all good. Well, Andy Serkis was in a lot of it.
I was going
right?
to say Andy Serkis. You know, he was incredible. I mean, he is. I mean, he's had another incredible decade. I mean, he just as the mocap legend himself. I mean, there's just so many of these. I mean, it kind of rounded out with a beautiful arc, and
interesting.
I loved it.
That was one that I didn't hear a lot of people talking about, I guess because it just wasn't in my sphere of people when it was coming out. But yeah, it got a strong reception of the votes. The other ones that kind of came in around 10%, we got Godzilla, big cool monsterverse over at Legendary, and then Man of Steel. We included Man of Steel because it was kind of a Superman reboot.
Yeah,
that then fed into the larger DC film slate. Now, on that segue, we wanted the best television adaptation of a comic series because this was an unprecedented, even in the last 5 years, comic books getting picked up not only as movies but as serious television, and not really a surprise. I mean, compared with a couple of other ones on the list, I was surprised that the second place one didn't actually win.
Yeah.
But Daredevil came out with 30%. Marvel's Netflix Daredevil, again, a really strong showing.
Incredible show.
That the Marvel Netflix experiment, I think, was more successful than a lot of people will give it credit for. I think the unfortunate cancellation of all the series and the bigger missteps with Iron Fist and where Luke Cage and the Defenders faltered, and even season 2 of Jessica Jones, but Daredevil consistently remained a fan favorite.
Yeah.
But overall, what those shows did for what limited resources they have, where they couldn't really interact with the MCU as much, but they still were strong Marvel properties.
Yeah.
But showing that there's a place, you don't. Because we'd probably never see Daredevil in an Avengers film until they got to maybe phase 10, 12, 13. The street level heroes. And there is an interest in the more grounded stuff because even with the CW series, DC finds a strength, Marvel finds a strength. A lot of these shows find their footing in the more grounded superheroes. You can leave the cosmic epics to the film screen.
Right.
But yeah, so I was surprised. The Walking Dead actually came in second
place
with not as many votes. It came in with 12%, with the follow up being The Boys from Amazon on with 10%.
Yes,
and I wasn't surprised about The Boys with the reception it got and the way that it kind of lampooned the superhero culture and the movie moment that we were in. But I would have thought The Walking Dead at least would have had some more votes. But I think maybe the later seasons have kind of ruined people's perception.
I was going to say some of those votes probably were hucked away once once people were like, oh yeah, the last couple seasons I wasn't a big fan of them. But I mean, the Walking Dead fever for the first 5 or 6 seasons was something to behold. Because I don't know if you did, but I read some. I mean, I think the comic started in 2003.
Yeah,
something like that.
Something real early.
I mean, I started reading them and I was like, it's okay. It's like zombies. It was before the zombie genre, I think, really kind of caught on.
Yeah.
But never did I think this this Image comic by this guy Robert Kirkman was gonna was gonna spawn so many. Now we've got spinoffs coming, and they had to Fear the Walking Dead, and Kirkman had Outcast coming out, and I mean I think that show, it had so much love for it for so long, but then you were right. And it is
interesting as you look through these. I think I noted to you before we recorded, a lot of the DC stuff that got the most votes was the very beginning of the decade with Flashpoint and Scott Snyder's Batman. But things like Joker and even Wonder Woman, even though it was a couple years ago now, which is bizarre to say, a lot of the DC love seems to be on the earlier end of the decade. Even the Dark Knight Rises trilogy.
Yeah,
a lot of the Marvel stuff is the current moment, the most recent stuff. And so I wonder how the perception of what is most recent plays into it, because if what was most recent you didn't like, you'll go, well, it's never as good as it was back at the beginning. But
exactly.
If the newest stuff is what you love, you're like, yeah, of course, it's getting better all the time. The best stuff is what's coming out right now, which is interesting then that we get Rogue One, which is kind of nice in the middle of the Star Wars content. But The Mandalorian is on the heels of that, and it's a show that hasn't even finished, and people are saying this is the best Star Wars content of the decade.
Yeah.
So it is very interesting how nostalgia and just the perception. Mad Max was solidly in the middle of this decade, which that's cool that it stood up. So it is very interesting to see if it was at the beginning or at the end and how. So yeah, I would have been curious to see. Maybe if we
it's very polarizing.
Maybe if we did this poll like 2 years ago, Walking Dead would have been higher. Yeah. Maybe if we did something with Game of Thrones 2 years ago, it would have been higher before that finale. But whatever, that's the nature of people choosing favorites. I mean, this list is not the end all be all. If it was your favorite thing of the decade, then it's your favorite thing of the decade. But this is where I took this is the final category now. We've gone through the 10 main ones. This is where I took a special pleasure in setting this one up. We asked the fans, who's cuter, Baby Yoda or Baby Groot?
Oh, man.
We got a lot of hate for this one.
Yes, we did.
And I wouldn't be surprised now if Disney realizes that the baby formula, no pun intended, because that's weird, but the baby version of these characters, like, that's the way to do it. I mean, we've had baby Muppets, and DC's had, or Warner Brothers has had baby Looney Tunes. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see some more baby versions, if they're used sparingly.
Yes, exactly.
But enough vamping. Paul, what did you choose? Who did you choose? Personally,
I chose the child, Baby Yoda. I loved. I mean, it also might be because he's like freshest in my mind, but I mean, he's adorable. I mean, don't get me wrong, loved Baby Groot, but I mean, I don't know.
It's interesting, yeah, because it's also like,
it's hard.
Are we going to see a teenaged Baby Yoda like we saw teenage Groot, and then it's like, you're not that cute.
I don't want to see a teenage Yoda.
In my 2 votes, I was very diplomatic, and I gave 1 vote to Baby Groot and 1 vote to Baby Yoda.
Good for you.
I know, I have that power. But the fans have decided Baby Yoda is cuter than Baby Groot with 62% of the votes, and I do believe maybe it is a freshness factor. We haven't had the merchandise for Baby Yoda yet. But I mean, like, who can deny how cute the Hot Toys life-size Baby Groot was? Like, that was insanely cute, and it still is. And like, I mean, honestly, this was a question that wasn't fair from the onset, because they're both very, very cute. But I wanted to see what would happen.
Right. I mean, Baby Groot was fighting an uphill battle, you know.
Was.
But hey, only 62%.
Because he's a teenager now.
Because he's a teenager now. Yeah, he's not quite there. But I mean, there was a bit of a meme-ageddon for Baby Groot as well, like we're going through with Baby Yoda. It's just, again, Baby Yoda's newest.
Yeah,
new kid on the block.
Yeah, so 62%. This is the way. I have spoken. Baby Groot, sorry about that, buddy.
You'll be fine.
You had your moment.
Go play your game.
Yeah. You know what? You call up Baby Yoda in 3 or 4 years' time and go, now you understand, because there's a new kid on the block.
Baby Groot, better dancer?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
I guess we'll see. Where the Mandalorian's not over yet, so.
Yeah. There's still plenty of room for Jon Favreau to give us that long-awaited Baby Yoda dance scene.
Baby Yoda moonwalk. I've been emailing him back and forth. Well, mainly just me emailing him.
Yeah, but no. So I mean, ultimately, again, these votes were fans who found their way to our website and gave their opinions on these polls that may or may not have had all their favorite options. So at the end of the day, whatever you got out of this decade in pop culture, that's what's most important.
Exactly.
There's no one way to say what was definitively best overall, no matter how many people vote for Baby Yoda. The fact that we were able to go for categories like TV adaptation of a comic and franchise reboot and superhero casting, like, just shows how lucky we are right now as fans.
Yeah.
For the wealth of content that's available. And all I can say is I don't even have too much time to be like, oh, wasn't that decade so nice? What's going to come up next? Because Marvel's already got their film slate bombarding us.
We already know what's coming up.
DC just announced Shazam's date. We've got The Matrix 4 coming up. We're in a Keanu-sance right now for all of, I think there's like
so much Keanu's.
Matrix and the next John Wick or something are coming out on the same day. Or whatever, which I think Bill and Ted should try to get in on that and just have a total Keanu breakdown. So it's just a really exciting time to be a geek. We've got so much good stuff coming up. So thank you 2019 and the 2010s for everything you did for us, but there's a whole new decade to jump right into.
Upwards and onwards.
Upwards and onwards. We want to thank all of our listeners for another amazing year of fun and fandom. 2019 was extremely exciting for pop culture content, and we look forward to bringing you even more podcasts and shows in 2020 and beyond. Thank you for participating in this fan-chosen countdown of some of pop culture's biggest hits of the decade. We couldn't have done it without you. What was your favorite moment of pop culture during the last 10 years? Think we missed something worth mentioning on the countdown? If so, be sure to check out our blog and send us your opinions at podcasts@sideshow.com. And that was the best in pop culture of the last decade. Do you enjoy the Geek Culture Countdown? We are proud to bring you pop culture content completely ad-free, but that doesn't mean we don't need your support to help keep us going. Please take a moment to leave us a 5-star review on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcasting platform and help spread the word about our podcast. We welcome fan feedback. Email us at podcasts@sideshow.com with your thoughts and suggestions for how we can make our shows even better. Plus, tune in for our other pop culture podcasts. See your favorite comic and film characters evolve across 2 generations in the bi-weekly Then and Now podcast. Hear exclusive interviews with celebrities and pop culture industry leaders as they let their geek side show in Look Who Showed Up. Then get all the latest pop culture news with our daily briefing, a 2-minute breakdown of all the biggest geek headlines perfect for your Alexa or Google News briefings. We wouldn't exist without your continued support. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to let your geek side show.